I sat in the cold leather chair, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my nails dug into my palms. The air in the lawyer's office was thick, stale, suffocating. The faint scent of old books and polished wood clung to the space, but all I could focus on was the man sitting across from me, Mr. Harrison, my father's lawyer. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, his fingers pressing against the thick stack of legal documents in front of him. The will. My father's final words. Beside me, my older brother Jake sprawled lazily in his chair, stretching his arms behind his head like this was some casual meeting. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth as if he already knew what was coming. Next to him sat Olivia, my younger sister. She was the picture of quiet elegance, her blonde hair tucked neatly behind one ear, her lips pursed in a practiced expression of concern. But I caught it. The slight glint in her eyes, the way her fingers toyed with the delicate gold bracelet on her wrist. They knew. A pit formed in my stomach as Mr. Harrison exhaled and adjusted the papers, his voice steady and impersonal. As per Robert Calloway's last will and testament, all assets, properties, and financial holdings shall be divided between his two children, Jake and Olivia Calloway. Silence. My breath hitched. My grip on my dress tightened. Jake let out a low chuckle under his breath, shaking his head in mock amusement. Olivia glanced in my direction, her lashes fluttering in a way that almost looked pitying. No, this had to be a mistake. I turned to Mr. Harrison, my lips parting to speak, but before I could find the words, he flipped to another page. His expression didn't waver. To his daughter, Sophia Calloway, Robert has left a personal letter. A letter. That was it. A heavy pressure squeezed my chest, making it impossible to breathe. The room blurred slightly, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I barely noticed Mr. Harrison sliding the envelope toward me. My name was written on the front in my father's familiar, sharp handwriting. With trembling fingers, I pulled the flap open and unfolded the letter. Sophia, you never amounted to much. I always hoped you would prove me wrong, but in the end, I had to do what was best for the family. This is the way it should be. My stomach twisted violently, the words carved into me like a blade, each sentence cutting deeper than the last. Never amounted to much. Even in death, he couldn't find it in himself to love me, to see me. A lump burned in my throat, but I forced it down. I wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. Jake let out another chuckle, louder this time. Damn, he actually wrote that? He turned to Olivia, shaking his head in disbelief. That's cold. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. Olivia exhaled, tilting her head slightly. Sophia, I know this is hard for you, but Dad just did what he thought was best for the family. Best for who? I could barely hear them anymore. The weight of the letter sat heavy in my lap, its words seared into my mind. I had spent my entire life trying to earn his approval, trying to be enough. And in the end, all I got was a letter. Slowly, methodically, I folded the paper, smoothing down its creases with careful precision. Then I placed it back inside the envelope as if it were nothing more than a meaningless piece of paper. And I stood. The chair scraped against the floor, the sound slicing through the silence. Jake raised an eyebrow. You're not going to say anything? I met his gaze, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. No. And then I turned and walked out. No goodbyes, no questions, just silence. I felt their eyes burning into my back, heard the quiet scoff from Jake, the forced exhale from Olivia. They thought I was walking away in defeat. They thought they had won. But what they didn't know was that 3 months from now, I would be back. And this time, they would be the ones left with nothing. The moment I stepped out of the lawyer's office, the cold autumn air slapped against my face. My lungs tightened as if I had just been sucker punched. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. But the weight of my father's words clung to me like a phantom, refusing to let go. I never amounted to much. The words replayed in my head, each repetition cutting deeper, like shards of glass lodged in my chest. My fingers curled into fists at my sides as I forced myself to keep walking, each step feeling heavier than the last. I barely heard my heels clicking against the pavement or the distant hum of traffic. Everything felt muted, as if I were underwater. Then, behind me, a voice. Sophia. I stiffened. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Olivia. Her footsteps were soft, hesitant. The kind of footsteps you take when you know you've done something wrong, don't really regret it. I exhaled sharply and forced myself to keep walking. "Come on, don't be like this," she called after me. "Let's just talk." Talk? Now? After she sat there, watching me be erased from my own family's legacy without so much as a word? I should have ignored her, should have kept walking until she gave up and let me go. But something inside me snapped. I stopped in my tracks and turned slowly. Olivia stood there, arms crossed over her chest, a look of forced sympathy on her face. Her perfect blonde hair was still in place, her designer coat buttoned neatly. She looked like she had just walked out of a high-end boutique, not a room where she helped bury her sister's dignity. I swallowed down the bitterness rising in my throat. "Talk about what, Olivia?" My voice was even, but my hands trembled at my sides. "How you and Jake walked away with everything. How Dad made sure I'd never have a place in this family." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not like that, Sophia. You know Dad always had expectations. And you," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "you never really fit into that." Fit into what? The perfect little mold he built for Jake? The obedient, polished image he crafted for Olivia? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Right. I never fit in. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't... My voice caught in my throat, my nails digging into my palms. Olivia sighed, glancing away for a brief second, and in that moment, I saw it. The flicker of something. Guilt? Regret? Maybe even shame? But it was gone as quickly as it came. "Sophia, listen," she said, shifting her weight. "You have to let this go. Fighting it won't change anything. Dad made his choice." I stared at her, searching her face for even the slightest sign that she understood what she had just said. Dad made his choice, and she was fine with it. My hands curled into fists at my sides, my nails biting into my skin. A burning sensation crept up my throat, but I refused to let the tears come. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and looked her in the eye. "You know what, Olivia? You're right. Dad made his choice, and so did you." Her brows furrowed. "Sophia?" I shook my head. "Number, I get it now. I was never one of you, and I never will be." The finality in my own words surprised me, but the more I said it, the more it felt true. I turned away before she could say anything else. I didn't need to hear her justifications. I didn't need her pity. I just needed to get away. As I walked, my mind raced. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, it all swirled together in my chest, suffocating me. But then, buried beneath it all, something else sparked to life. A memory, a conversation I'd almost forgotten. My mother, sitting across from me at the kitchen table late one night, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Your father, he does things his way, Sophia. But one day, you might realize that not everything is as it seems." I had brushed it off at the time, thinking it was just another one of her cryptic warnings. But now, those words clawed their way back into my mind. Not everything is as it seems. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. I needed answers. And suddenly, for the first time since I walked out of that office, I realized something. This wasn't over. Not even close. I sat at my small kitchen table, my fingers curled around a steaming cup of coffee, though I barely felt the warmth against my palms. The apartment was silent except for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the faint hum of traffic outside my window. 3 days had passed since the will reading, 3 days of sitting with the weight of my father's betrayal pressing against my chest like a stone. Jake and Olivia had everything now, the house, the accounts, the investments. They had walked away with smirks on their faces, secure in their victory. And me? I had a letter that might as well have been a final slap in the face. I wanted to move on, to let it go, but I couldn't. Not after what my mother had once told me. Your father, he does things his way, Sophia. But one day you might realize that not everything is as it seems. Her voice played in my head over and over again. Not everything is as it seems. What did she mean by that? I set my coffee down, my fingers shaking slightly as I pulled out my laptop. If there was even the slightest chance that my father had hidden something, I needed to know. I started with the property records. Jake and Olivia had inherited the estate, but my father had owned multiple properties over the years. I clicked through page after page, my heartbeat accelerating. There had to be something. Then, there it was. A document buried in the county records. A property deed transfer. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked on it, my eyes scanning the document as my pulse pounded in my ears. The date. It was 6 months before my father's death. And the recipient? Me. I read it again, my fingers tightening around the mouse. Number, that couldn't be right. But it was. A legally binding transfer. A signature. A notarized confirmation that my father had, in fact, transferred ownership of his primary home to me. I covered my mouth with my hand, my stomach twisting into knots. Why? Why would he leave everything to Jake and Olivia in the will, but transfer the house to me in secret? I scrolled down, my eyes scanning every word, every signature. It was real. A sharp knock at my door made me jump. My pulse was still racing as I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. I opened the door to find an older man standing there, his gray hair combed neatly to the side, his expression unreadable. Miss Calloway? I swallowed, gripping the edge of the door. Yes? My name is Richard Porter. I was your father's financial advisor. My breath caught. My father's financial advisor? Why was he here now? He glanced around as if checking to see if anyone was watching, then cleared his throat. I think you might want to sit down. There's something you need to know. I hesitated, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, wordlessly, I stepped aside, letting him in. As I closed the door behind him, a cold shiver ran down my spine. Something told me that whatever he was about to say would change everything. Richard Porter sat across from me at my tiny kitchen table, his hands folded neatly in front of him. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Hesitation. Maybe even regret. I could feel the tension thickening the air between us. I swallowed hard. You said I needed to know something, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What is it? He exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his forehead as if debating how to begin. Your father? He wasn't always an easy man to work for. That was an understatement. My father was ruthless, cold, calculating, a man who believed that power belonged to those who deserved it. And in his eyes, I had never been one of them. Richard continued, his gaze fixed on the table. But there were things he didn't share with many people. Things he regretted. A chill crawled up my spine. What are you talking about? He hesitated before reaching into his briefcase and pulling out a folder. The pages inside were slightly worn, as if they had been handled too many times. He slid them across the table. With trembling fingers, I opened the folder. My breath caught in my throat. It was the original deed transfer, the one I had found in the records. My father had legally transferred the house to me, but as I flipped through the pages, something else caught my eye. A handwritten letter. The edges were frayed, the ink slightly smudged. My chest tightened as I recognized my father's handwriting. Sophia, if you're reading this, it means something has gone terribly wrong. I felt my pulse hammer against my ribs. There are things I should have told you. I made mistakes, many of them, but I wanted to set things right in the end. That's why I transferred the house to you. Not just the house, but everything tied to it. I need you to know that this was always meant to be yours. I inhaled sharply, gripping the paper so tightly my knuckles turned white. He knew. He knew all along. I looked up at Richard, my heart pounding. Why would he do this in secret? Why transfer everything to me, but then leave Jake and Olivia everything else in the will? Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair, because he didn't trust them. The words hit me like a slap. He told me once that he had started to see who they really were, Richard continued, that he had spent years believing Jake was his perfect heir, and Olivia, well, she had always been skilled at playing the role she needed to. He sighed, but he knew that if he openly left everything to you, they would fight it, maybe even try to undo it. A lump formed in my throat. So he hid it? Richard nodded. He thought it would protect you. My mind spun, trying to piece it all together. My father, the man who had spent my entire life dismissing me, had actually given me the one thing Jake and Olivia wanted the most. I felt a sharp sting behind my eyes. A mix of emotions twisted inside me: anger, confusion, grief. I had spent so long believing he had abandoned me completely. This changed everything. A thought struck me suddenly. If the house was legally mine, why wasn't this mentioned at the will reading? Richard's expression darkened. Because they didn't want you to know. The words sent a shiver down my spine. What do you mean? My voice was barely above a whisper. He hesitated. Jake and Olivia, they had access to some of your father's personal files after he passed. I believe they found out about the transfer. A wave of nausea hit me. They hid it from you, Richard continued. If you had never gone looking, you would have never known. I gripped the table, my nails digging into the wood. They tried to steal it. Richard nodded. And they almost got away with it. A burning heat spread through my chest, my hands trembling with the force of my rage. They thought they could erase me, thought they could take everything and leave me with nothing. I took a deep breath, forcing the storm inside me to settle into something colder, sharper. I wasn't the weak, forgotten sister anymore. I looked at Richard, my voice steady. What do I have to do to take back what's mine? His lips curled into the smallest hint of a smile. I was hoping you'd ask. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than betrayal. It was no longer just pain or disbelief, no more shock. Now it was rage. A cold, controlled rage that spread through my veins, steadying me in a way that grief never could. Jake and Olivia had stolen from me, lied to me, manipulated me, and they thought they had won. I tightened my grip on the folder Richard had given me, the proof that my father had legally transferred the estate to me, the evidence that I was the rightful owner, while my so-called siblings had worked behind my back to bury the truth. They must have thought I'd never look, that I'd just accept my fate and disappear quietly. They underestimated me. Richard leaned forward, watching me carefully. Sophia, you have the upper hand now, but this won't be easy. I swallowed the lump in my throat, the adrenaline in my system making it impossible to sit still. What do I have to do? His expression remained calm, but I could see something flicker in his eyes, something sharp. He was a man who had spent his life dealing with power struggles and financial wars. He had seen people fight dirty, and now, so would I. We file the legal paperwork immediately, Richard said. Once the house deed is officially reinforced, you'll have the right to claim the property. But he hesitated. But what? He exhaled. Jake and Olivia aren't going to take this lying down. They'll fight it. They'll try to manipulate the situation, spin some story to the public, maybe even claim the will overrides the deed transfer. He paused, letting that sink in. They have money, connections, and power on their side. Are you ready for what comes next? My hands trembled, but I curled them into fists to stop it. They had always used their power against me, but this time, I wasn't the forgotten little sister in the shadows. This time, I was coming for what was mine. I met Richard's gaze, my voice steady. Let them try. He nodded, a hint of something almost like respect in his expression. Then, let's get to work. 2 days later, I stood outside the gates of my father's estate, my pulse thrumming beneath my skin. The towering wrought iron fence loomed before me, a symbol of everything that had been stolen. The house beyond it was massive, pristine, untouched by the chaos of the past few weeks. Jake and Olivia had made themselves comfortable, acting as if they had already won. They had no idea their world was about to come crashing down. I straightened my shoulders, gripping the legal documents in my hand. This wasn't just a visit, this was an eviction notice. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward and rang the intercom. A sharp buzz followed, then Olivia's familiar voice crackled through the speaker. "Who is it?" I smiled, a slow, calculated smile that she couldn't see. "It's Sophia." A pause. I could hear the faint sound of movement on the other end, followed by a slight exhale. She hadn't expected me to come back. "What do you want?" I took my time answering, savoring the moment. "I'd prefer to say it in person," I said smoothly. "Open the gate." Another pause, then the click of the lock releasing. I stepped inside, the sound of my boots echoing against the stone pathway as I made my way toward the front doors. Every step felt heavier, filled with the weight of every injustice I had suffered at their hands. Jake was standing in the doorway when I arrived. His arms were crossed, his expression cocky, as if he already had some witty remark loaded and ready. "Well, well," he drawled, leaning against the frame. "Back to admire what you lost?" I didn't answer. Instead, I held up the papers in my hand and watched as the smirk melted off his face. Olivia appeared beside him, her eyes narrowing when she saw the documents. "What is that?" she asked, her voice clipped. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Oh, this." I unfolded the top page, tapping my finger against the official heading. "It's just the legal proof that this house, my father's estate, is actually mine." Jake's body went rigid. Olivia's lips parted slightly, her face paling. It was delicious. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "Effective immediately," I continued, my voice steady. "You both have 30 days to vacate my property." Silence. Jake's jaw clenched. Olivia's nails dug into her palms. I could see their carefully constructed world cracking. For the first time in my life, they were the ones who had to answer to me. And I wasn't backing down. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. A thick, suffocating silence that settled over us like a dense fog. Jake and Olivia stood frozen in the doorway, their perfect little world crumbling in real time. I watched the emotions flicker across their faces. Confusion, denial, panic. They had spent months thinking they had won, that they had erased me, that they had taken everything. And now they were staring at the one thing they never expected. Consequences. Jake recovered first. His jaw tightened, and he let out a low chuckle, though it lacked his usual smug confidence. "You've got to be kidding me." His voice was strained, like he was trying to convince himself this wasn't real. I tilted my head, my grip tightening around the papers in my hand. "Oh, I'm very serious." Olivia, always the more composed one, stepped forward. "Sophia," she said smoothly, her tone almost soothing, "let's not do anything drastic. Maybe we can talk about this." I cut her off with a laugh, sharp, bitter. "Talk? You mean like the way you and Jake talked about stealing from me? The way you sat in that office and watched them read Dad's will, knowing you had already buried the real truth?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time in years, I had the power, and she hated it. Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "This doesn't make sense. Dad left us everything. The will was clear. The will was clear, but so was this." I held up the documents, watching his eyes flicker over them. Dad transferred ownership of this estate to me before he died. It's legally binding, and you both know it. Their reactions were like a drug. Jake shifting uncomfortably, Olivia's fingers curling into fists at her sides. I could see the panic creeping in, the idea that they wouldn't get away with it, that I wasn't the weak little sister they had always looked down on, that I had beaten them. Olivia recovered first, inhaling deeply before flashing me her carefully curated smile. "Sophia, I get it, you're upset, but throwing us out? That's not you." I stared at her, feeling a slow, simmering burn in my chest. She still thought she could manipulate me. "You're right," I said. "I wasn't the type of person to fight back before, but you both made me this way." Jake stepped forward, his voice darkening. "You really think you can kick us out?" I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "I don't think, I know. You have 30 days to pack your things and leave. And trust me, I'll make sure the courts enforce it." His face darkened, and for a split second I saw something new in his expression. Not arrogance, not amusement, fear. A small, satisfied thrill ran through me. I had spent years feeling small, years feeling insignificant. They had expected me to crumble, to fade into the background like I always had. Not this time. Olivia exhaled sharply, her eyes darting to Jake. "This isn't over," she muttered. I shrugged. "Oh, but it is. You just don't know it yet." I turned on my heel, the cold wind hitting my face as I walked away from the house that had once been a prison to me. But now it was mine, and they were the ones being locked out. As I walked away, leaving Jake and Olivia standing there in stunned silence, a thought crossed my mind. Was this justice or just revenge? Maybe both. I had fought for what was rightfully mine. I had taken back what they tried to steal. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder, would they really leave without a fight? Or was this just the beginning of an even bigger battle? What do you think? Would you have done the same in my place? Or would you have walked away and let karma do the work? Let me know in the comments below, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is proving them wrong.